The two biggest car reveals of the season, Ferrari and Mercedes, are now done, and both of them were worth the watch. That's how it's meant to be done, Red Bull. The Ferrari reveal in particular was a great watch and featured a live run of the SF23. What was perhaps most interesting though was that Ferrari had blatantly stolen a design from Mercedes, a design that Mercedes themselves didn't have on their 2023 car. It's honestly shocking how blatant it is, but why haven't Mercedes used this piece of tech on their car? Have the Silver Arrows already made a mistake? We'll answer those questions and look at some other interesting pieces of the Ferrari reveal in this video. Let's get started. If you cast your mind back to the 2022 American Grand Prix in Austin, Texas, you might remember that Mercedes had a new front wing that garnered a lot of attention. We spoke about it in depth on this channel back then, but to give you a quick recap, Mercedes had a new wing that they wanted to test. All Formula 1 front wings use something called a slot gap separator. It sits between the separate wing elements and adds stability to each element. Everyone uses them, but until the Grand Prix in Austin, no one tried using them for aerodynamic purposes. Mercedes did though. Rivals were unhappy about the design because they felt it was in breach of Article 3.9.8 of F1's technical regulations that limited the scope for such components to deliver an aero boost. The rules stated that, while such slot gap separators were allowed, they were not supposed to deliver a direct aerodynamic influence. The regulations stated that such strakes could be fitted for primarily mechanical, structural, or measurement reasons. Mercedes felt at the time that its design did follow the rules, as the aerodynamic influence was a secondary consequence. However, with rival teams complaining about the matter and the FIA looking closer at the design despite having signed off the original idea, Mercedes eventually decided to remove the strakes by the time the wing made its first appearance at the Mexican Grand Prix. Technical director Mike Elliott said before the team took them off the car, "I think there's a fuss about it because in the regulations, it talks about the primary use being for mechanical or measurement purposes. And clearly there's a secondary benefit of an aerodynamic design that's in there as well. We'll decide whether we want to argue that one or not. It's actually not worth a huge amount. That detail looks interesting, but it's not the big thing on the front wing." You can understand Mercedes' annoyance at the time because the rules were pretty vague and they seemed to be genuinely making the most of a grey area. That is the very thing that Formula 1 is built on after all. So when Ferrari revealed their car featuring slot gap separators that had an obvious aerodynamic effect, people went wild. Ferrari had blatantly stolen Mercedes' idea, which was illegal last year. Loads of people were furiously asking how they think they can get away with it. What is even more surprising is that Mercedes don't have the aerodynamic slot gap separators on their car. Why would Ferrari use Mercedes' design, which is probably illegal, if Mercedes themselves aren't going to use it? Well, a quick dive into the technical regulations tells us that actually it is now legal. As part of revised technical regulations for 2023 that were published in early December, the FIA removed the key sentence that laid down the requirements for such strakes to be primarily for mechanical, structural, or measurement reasons. This means that as long as the slot gap separators provide a structural connection between consecutive front wing profiles and comply with strict measurement requirements, then they're now fully legal, no matter how much of an aerodynamic boost they deliver. The reason they were being contested in the first place is because it looked like they would create a lot of outwash, which dirties the air behind a car, something the FIA really want to avoid. These new rules are aimed to encourage close racing, and having loads of dirty air behind a car makes achieving that goal impossible. So while these separators appear to be legal for now, it will be interesting to see if the FIA responds in any way throughout the season to ban them for next year, if not sooner. So, did Mercedes miss this change? The slot gap separators on the new Mercedes are the same as the rest of the grids were last season. It is only a minor rule change, but you would imagine that the first thing the teams do when new rules are released is go through them with a highlighter and mark any changes. If Mercedes have missed this, then that is a hugely disappointing mistake, and could be an expensive one as well. Making new front wings costs money. The alternative is that they think that the shaped separators are actually detrimental to the overall aero design, which then raises the question of whether Ferrari have made a mistake. We'll have to wait and see if Mercedes add them on for the Bahrain test, or if the FIA steps in and stops Ferrari from using them. While we wait to find out what happens with the front wings, let's look at what else Ferrari changed for this year's car. While the SF23 may stick to the core philosophy of the F175, there are some fascinating areas of development that the Scuderia has focused on. Starting with the side pods, which have been a focus of all the car launches so far this season, with most of the field gravitating towards a variation of the Red Bull design that proved to be successful last season. Ferrari aren't a team that copies others though. Well, they weren't anyway. They've stuck with their design from last year with some obvious innovations. As part of these changes, the gills, which had previously provided a continuous set of outlets along the side pod and engine cover surface, have been split into two distinct sections, with the rearmost set into its own interchangeable panel. This will provide the team with a way to change the car's cooling system without the need to carry multiple large pieces of bodywork around the world. It is a sensible cost-cutting exercise that will also help save time on race weekends and allow them to make track-specific changes with ease. Perhaps the most interesting addition is a duct that intakes air just below the side pod and expels it next to the driver's shoulder on either side. It's unclear if this is simply an additional cooling outlet or whether it has more of an aerodynamic function. Many people have pointed out how it's reminiscent of the F duct that was quickly banned in 2011. I'm sure if it is worthy of FIA inspection, we'll hear about it soon enough, though the design should have already been okayed by the FIA. There were plenty of other changes to the Ferrari, but if we covered them all, we could literally be here all day. And even if we did spend all day on it, we won't know how effective it'll be until the Bahrain test at the end of the month. That doesn't mean we can't make some wild predictions though, and assess how the team appears to have performed over the winter break. The big question that Ferrari needs to answer is, can they take that final step? After years and years of being nearly good enough, do they actually have what it takes to be the best team on the grid over a whole year? Between 1999 and 2008, that's 10 years, they won all but 2 Constructors' Championships. Since then though, nothing. Ferrari are not the top team that they once were. This isn't about them being the best and just falling short. This is about them having to prove that they can mix it with the best, Mercedes and Red Bull. Just like Alpine or McLaren, Ferrari have to make steps forward, not just tweak things. Despite their lack of success for so many seasons, the whispers that this Ferrari team might just be the real deal have started. When the SF23 broke cover at Fiorano on Tuesday, there were careful comments being made by Frederic Vasseur and his 2 drivers as they sat down with the media. "There's been a lot of work done. We know where to focus in order to get better," Charles Leclerc said. "Now we need to prove it." These weren't the comments of the same old cocky Ferrari. The interview was filled with determination and realism. Last year, they learned that you can't just turn up after the winter and, if you have the fastest car, coast to victory. You have to have the drive and the fire to fight from the first lap of the season to the last. Mattia Binotto failed in his job in this regard. This is where Vasseur will have to succeed. There's talk that Ferrari switched development focus to the 2023 car earlier than people think, as early as the French Grand Prix, which makes the winless run after the summer break less of an omen than it appeared. The efforts to solve the engine reliability issue were apparently successful. So Ferrari has reclaimed the power it sacrificed in the second half of last season, not finding 30 horsepower extra, as has at times been misunderstood. And the usual winter of development, combined with a lot of work to address specific balance issues, a degree of aerodynamic instability and tyre management, has unlocked a good step on the chassis side. Throw in the arrival of Vasseur and a fresh perspective that is already resulting in some minor adjustments to the team's strategic processes, and there's an overwhelming feeling that each one of Ferrari's crippling 2022 weaknesses has been addressed. All of that together means they might be the early favourites for both titles this year, which is something that hasn't been said in over a decade. Is this the Scuderia's year? Or is this another false dawn? Let us know your opinions in the comments, and on your way down, don't forget to subscribe in preparation for the 2023 season. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.